If you're listening right now and you're thinking about stepping into a management role, or you've already been asked, you're probably sitting in one of three positions. Maybe you're confident. You think to yourself, I've got this, people naturally follow me. Maybe you're on the fence. I think I could lead, but I'm not sure I have the right personality. Or maybe you're convinced you're not cut out for it. I'm not the loudest person in the room. Leadership is for the born leaders. Today, we're walking through the evidence around who succeeds in leadership so you can decide for yourself whether leadership is something you can develop, and also so that companies can stop using trial and error as their primary selection tool. Most of what you find online is a diet of shiny new fads, but this is the place we cut through it all and reach for the evidence that actually moves the needle, for you and for your organization. I'm Brian Plowman, your friendly horsefly, here to keep us sharp and challenge the assumptions and fads that don't deliver. Here's the uncomfortable truth about leadership selection that most companies never tell you. The way they pick early managers is often expensive, inefficient, and biased. For example, many organizations treat an employee's first leadership role itself as the filter. They promote high performers, watch them sink or swim, and then decide whether those people are ready for bigger jobs later. That approach burns talent, damages teams, and costs far more than rigorous assessment ever would. And the research is clear. This isn't a simple born versus built debate. Genetics do play a real role, but experience and training play an even larger one. But the piece that most organizations leave out is deliberate, research-backed selection, especially because the very traits that help someone look like a leader, extroversion and narcissistic confidence, create a built-in bias that can put the wrong people on the leadership track. So let's start with the born side of the ledger, because the data is more solid than most people assume. Behavioral genetics studies, mainly twins research, consistently show that genetic factors account for roughly 20 to 40% of the variance in all who ends up in occupying leadership roles. One well-known study by Arvey and colleagues in 2006 looked at male twins and estimated that genetics explained about 30% of leadership role occupancy. A parallel study of female twins came in at around 32%. Another analysis using data from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health put the figure at 24% and even identified a specific genotype linked to higher odds of holding leadership positions. But those genetic influences don't operate in a vacuum. They show up partly through heritable personality traits, extroversion, social potency, and achievement drive, as well as cognitive ability. In other words, some people are predisposed to seek leadership opportunities and to be selected for them. Narcissism illustrates this cleanly. I recorded an earlier podcast on this topic, and I encourage you to go take a look at it for a deep dive into narcissism's link to business leadership. I'll put a link in the comments for you. How do narcissists get into leadership roles? Well, they do well in terms of leadership emergence, those characteristics that companies tend to prefer when looking for early career leaders. A major meta-analysis by Grijalva and colleagues in 2015 found a positive relationship between narcissism and leadership emergence. That link is largely explained by the overlap with extroversion. You see, narcissists tend to be confident, assertive, and good at self-promotion. In leaderless group discussions, they get rated as leaders more often. One Italian study even found that a 1 standard deviation increase in narcissism was associated with roughly 29% higher odds of being appointed a CEO. Prevalence numbers line up with this pattern. When directors rate CEOs on a short narcissism measure, about 18% of those CEOs fall into the moderate to high range, compared with roughly 5% in the general U.S. population. So, yes, certain stable personal characteristics give some people a head start in getting the role. But there is a critical distinction that research keeps making. Emergence is not the same as effectiveness. The same meta-analysis that linked narcissism to emergence found essentially zero linear relationship with leadership effectiveness as rated by others. There is evidence of a curvilinear pattern, an inverted U, suggesting moderate levels may help while extremes hurt. Longitudinal studies show a predictable arc. Narcissists often enjoy a honeymoon period of high ratings, then the association fades or turns negative as people get to know them. Rivalry-oriented narcissism, in particular, predicts declining effectiveness ratings over time because colleagues start to see self-maximizing behavior and a lack of genuine concern for the group. Organizational consequences follow the same mixed pattern. Short-term boldness or vision can appear, but the longer-term picture includes lower subordinate attitudes, reduced knowledge sharing, higher turnover, and riskier or more self-serving decisions. So the born side is real, but it mainly predicts who rises, not who sustains performance. So let's take a look at the built side. The majority of the variance in leadership outcomes is environmental, especially non-shared experiences, the specific jobs, relationships, challenges, and deliberate practice unique to each person. Meta-analysis of leadership training and development programs show moderate to large positive effects. Gains are stronger when programs include needs analysis, practice opportunities, feedback, spaced sessions, and organizational support. Skills and behavior improvements tend to last longer than pure knowledge gains. Longitudinal research reinforces this. Challenging assignments, mentoring, reflection, and formal development build capacity. Even where genetic predispositions exist, gene-environment interplay matters. People seek environments that fit their traits, and experiences can modify how those traits are expressed. The scholarly consensus, reflected in work from the Center for Creative Leadership and reviews and outlets such as the Leadership Quarterly, is that leaders are primarily made, again with genetics playing a supporting role of roughly 30%. So, classic great person theories have been replaced by integrative models that recognize that both nature and nurture matter. So here's the element most businesses still leave out: rigorous selection that accounts for the bias toward the very traits that drive emergence. Extroversion and narcissistic confidence create strong first impressions. They help in unstructured interviews, brief interactions, and early team settings. That's exactly why many organizations end up promoting people who look the part and then discover later that the long-term fit is poor. Using the early management role itself as the filter is costly. Teams suffer, high-potential people get burned, and the pipeline for senior roles is contaminated. Evidence-based screening can change that. Research on personal traits shows that extroversion and conscientiousness predict both emergence and effectiveness, but emotional stability, agreeableness, especially in certain cultures, and particularly honesty, humility, add unique value for sustained performance. Cognitive ability remains a strong general predictor. Leader behaviors, consideration, and initiating structure often explain more variance in effectiveness than traits alone and mediate many trait effects. So how do we actually screen? Are there tools out there that will allow us to do that? And there are. Practical tools do exist. Structured behavioral and situational interviews can target concrete examples of shared credit, learning from failure, empathy, and long-term impact instead of polished self-narratives. Instruments such as the Narcissism Interview Scale for Employment, or NICE for short, ask about leading teams and handling disagreement that requires consensus, then score responses for grandiose tendencies. There's another side of this. It's called dark side assessments, and they matter also. One of the best is the Hogan Development Survey, which was developed by Robert and Joyce Hogan. That survey measures 11 subclinical derailers that emerge under stress, pressure or when people stop managing their image. Scales such as bold capture entitlement and resistance to feedback. Other scales flag volatility, cynicism, passive resistance, risk-taking, and perfectionism. Elevated scores are not automatic disqualifiers. They flag areas for deeper probing, maybe 360 feedback or coaching. The Hogan Development Survey is designed for working adults, has no adverse impact by age, race, or gender, and has been validated against managerial performance and derailment risk. Assessment centers with multiple simulations observed over time reduce pure impression management advantages. Reference checks focused on former subordinates, rather than just peers or bosses, reveal the kiss up, kick down pattern. Multi-method approaches that combine cognitive ability, conscientiousness, or integrity measures, structured behavioral data, and dark side screening outperform unstructured interviews or single charismatic impressions. So what are the actionable takeaways, whether you are an individual considering management or a leader responsible for building the pipeline? First, for individuals, leadership capacity is substantially developable. If you are lower on the extroversion or confidence spectrum, that does not disqualify you. Focus on deliberate practice. Seek stretch assignments, solicit honest feedback, build consideration and task-oriented behaviors, and develop the humility and integrity that predict long-term effectiveness. If you score higher on narcissistic or bold tendencies, treat that awareness as useful data. Moderate the self-maximizing patterns early. The research shows they erode effectiveness over time. Second, for organizations, stop treating the first management role as the primary filter. Invest in multi-method selection before promotion. Use structured interviews, validated dark side tools such as the Hogan Development Survey, 360 input from subordinates, and assessment center simulations. Weight predictors of sustained effectiveness, things like cognitive ability, conscientiousness, relationship skills, and behavioral consistency, more heavily than pure confidence signaling. Early leaders form the pipeline for senior roles. Getting the entry point right is both cheaper and more strategic than repeated course corrections later. Third, and this is for everyone, remember the distinction between emergence and effectiveness. The traits that help someone get selected are only partially overlapping with the traits and behaviors that help them succeed once selected. Rigorous testing closes that gap. Leadership is neither purely innate nor purely learned. Genetics provide a measurable but limited predisposition. Experience, training, and environment do the heavier lifting. And deliberate research-based selection is the missing practice that turns both into better organizational outcomes. If you're weighing that first management step, the evidence says you can build the capacity, and the companies that will thrive are the ones that stop guessing and start assessing properly. If this episode was useful, share it with someone who's about to step into or select their first leadership role. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me. In a world full of leadership noise, keep reaching for the evidence that moves the needle. Stay sharp, keep challenging those outdated assumptions, and go make something better. I'm the Contrarian Leader. I'm pulling for you. See you next time.